I'd like to welcome all of you to the second high-tech event of the year. Delighted that you're here. It's an exciting evening because this marks the resurrection of our cloud track. A number of months ago we had an active cloud track, and then there were some circumstances beyond our control, and we are back in control now, and are delighted that we have a new track leader, Rose Klimovich, who I'll be introducing in a second. And it's obviously an exciting topic, and we're delighted to have the panelists we have tonight. Unfortunately, Chris Calley is currently a victim of the flu, and so thanking him for not showing up tonight in his current state. But before I turn it over to Rose, I'd like to thank our annual sponsors. I know it sounds corny, but without them we wouldn't be here. They're the ones who pay most of the bills, and we're very grateful to them. We have a new name on this list, Infor, a very large software company, over $2 billion a year. They have just changed their headquarters from near Atlanta, to New York. They have a killer space on 6th Avenue, and we'll be hosting a number of our events there, and plan to be a very active sponsor, so we're delighted they joined us. We'd like to thank Anchin for providing us this space tonight, and we'll be here again on Tuesday, so they're a great host, not just in providing a space, but in helping us with logistics while we're here. And now on to the main event, the benefits of cloud for video and image. I'll let Rose introduce the rest of the panel, but Rose and I go back to the mid-90s at AT&T, where we built the AT&T Internet service, and she was the one who got things done.
All right, first of all, I want to thank all the panelists for being here today. I know it's tough to get in and out of New York, but that's good that everybody's here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves, then I'm going to ask a few questions of all the panelists, and then I'm going to open it up for questions from you. So if you have any questions, kind of jot them down when we get to the question and answer part. So let me start with my background. Again, my name is Rose Klimovich. For many years, as Eric said, I worked at AT&T. When I left AT&T, I was the Vice President of Business Development. After I left AT&T, I worked for a company called Telex, who's a co-location company, and I was head of product management and product marketing when I worked there. And most recently, I have been teaching marketing at Manhattan College in the Bronx, so that's a little bit of a change of career for me. I also do some consulting and blogging and things like that on the side, and I write some blogging on things like cloud. And I also lead the cloud track here, so if there's anybody who has any interesting ideas they think would be good for future sessions or whatever, just let me know, because I'd really like to make this a vibrant part of the tracks. So let me start with Jonathan. You want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Jonathan Dahl. I was previously a founder and CEO of a company called Encoding that does video and audio transcoding in the cloud. We were acquired this summer by a company called Brightcove, who's end-to-end video publishing platform. And so I'm based in the Bay Area, but Brightcove is based in New York, and we have a bunch of, in Boston, but we have a bunch of New York clients. So I'm out here periodically.
David?
Cool. Well, I'm Dave Rocamora. I work for a company called Control Group, which is a New York-based technology services company. We do everything from technology, strategy, to product development, and then managed services, things like that. I work in the DevOps group, where we do a lot of cloud implementations, and working with clients in all different verticals, moving stuff to the cloud or optimizing their use of the cloud. Control Group's worked in media and entertainment for a long time. A couple of years ago, it seemed like all we were doing was HD upgrades, moving television shows and post-production houses to HD. And it's interesting to see, that's 3 or 4 years ago, to see those same people coming back and to talk about moving to the cloud and doing stuff like that. So that's hopefully what we're going to talk about tonight a little bit. So.
Yep. Sandip?
Hi, good evening, NYTech. Thank you for having me here. So I'm Sandip Chaudhari. I'm the CTO at Krossover. We do video film breakdown, basically tool for analysis of the game film for the coaches who can just upload a video footage that their team played last night, and next day they expect all the game film broken down into tags, and they can do their analysis from that point onwards. So we do have video as one of the main component. The service is all around the video, and we do use cloud. So we were at on dedicated, then we moved to hybrid, then we moved to cloud. So
Okay. Well, this will be interesting. It'll be a challenge like everything else if we keep with the noise, but we'll try to work through that. So let me just start off with the questions. The first question I'd like all the panelists to answer. So the first one is really, is cloud really a good IT infrastructure for image and video? And if so, why? So you want to start, Jonathan?
Yeah. Well, I think the answer is yes. Part of why I founded a company that does that.
Then we're going to ask the negative part. So just be
Sure,
ready for that.
yeah. So there's a lot of reasons, and some of those are just sort of the general benefits of cloud computing in terms of not having to manage maybe systems that are not core and essential to your business domain or business value. But video and images, but maybe even especially video, has the unique property of being both extremely computationally intensive. One of the most computationally intensive things you can do is manipulate a video, and most people have very unpredictable and bursty workloads. So if you end up buying hardware to handle a typical company's video transcoding needs, that hardware sits idle most of the time. Or if it's not idle most of the time, you have a long queue as stuff is waiting to get onto those servers. Whereas with cloud resources, you don't have to worry about that. You can literally have 10,000 servers 1 minute, and the next minute have 0.
David, what do you think?
I gotta agree with John. I like the cloud for video and image, but yeah, and I think those points are right on, and they're exactly what we're seeing. I think where it also gets to be very interesting for us. I mean, right now, two things I'd talk about is sort of long-term storage and archive. The costs of maintaining. We work with some television shows that we work with the Daily Show and the Colbert Report, and they maintain a large amount of footage that. For all of the, whenever they bring up a news clip on the show to make fun of or to point out someone saying something, what they'll do, they have a huge library. You can imagine the DVR that they actually have, which is records something like 30 channels at a time. Storing all that information and keeping it in a searchable, available place so they can call it up and put it on the air that night it's an undertaking. We've been working with them for a long time, but the availability of cloud tools where we can store video and keep it in a highly available way in a really cost-effective manner is really attractive. And also distribution. I think the cloud is amazing for video distribution right now. Why keep your video in your studio or in your office on servers when your customers and your viewers are outside in the real world? That's another place where the cloud is really great for video and image.
Sandip?
Yep. So I would definitely agree with both of you, especially John, the example that you gave. Burst load, that happens at Krossover. The queue, the long queue, I have to deal with that, and a few of my colleagues here, we have to deal with it day in, day out. We are very seasonal because sports are seasonal, so basketball right now is the season for us. And suddenly on Tuesdays, there are most of the games that get played across US, and everyone at 5 p.m. starts uploading, and so all this load can be very easily and scalably managed if we have cloud infrastructure. We used to have dedicated infrastructure, but then planning all before the season launches was really tough. There was no way to predict how the sales are going to happen or how much sales we would have how much load we would have, when we would have. Tuesdays, if we plan for Tuesdays, it would be all fine, but what happens for the rest of the week? So I think that's huge that we can scale. Another is storage. You can scale storage, but there are other benefits that you can stream this content, especially in case of videos, using CDN. So even if you are using cloud storage for streaming, you can use CDN where you don't have to bother about this extra infrastructure and load and all those kinds of scalability issues. So I definitely think that's the best option. Cloud, video, image, yes.
Okay, so it's good that everybody thinks that. But there's
We agree.
always kind of negatives or risks, I think, involved in things like this. This cloud is still a fairly new technology, and there are a lot of people that think there are issues around security, and the cost goes up as I put more stuff out there. That's not what I thought was going to happen. What do you see as some of the risks, and how would you deal with some of those things? Do you want to start?
Sure. I'll just hit this at a high level, and then I don't know how deep we're going to go into any of these, but when dealing with videos, files tend to be range from large to enormous, and so you have to account for bandwidth issues, maybe cost or time to get stuff up to the cloud. There's lots of ways around that, and there's better and worse ways of doing it, but it is something that needs to be weighed against other things.
Yeah, I mean I think we're definitely at a. What's interesting, a couple years ago, this wasn't really feasible. Maybe storing a huge video library in the cloud when you needed to access it in your office or your studio maybe not have been viable because of internet speeds or cost of getting highly reliable fast internet, things like that. But I think right now we're reaching a point where that stuff is changing. I mean, there's still some sort of technical limitations that are making the cloud maybe not quite there for some organizations. I'm pretty bullish on the cloud. I think that I don't want to be like the extremist in the panel, but I think that everyone should consider moving it or consider it as part of your plan if you're not already. But as far as security and legal and compliance kind of things that you were mentioning, Rose, like that certainly is a concern. I think it's a concern with any new technology when we're not maybe all the standards haven't been established. There's some uncertainty around it. But I think the fact is people are building really reliable and secure platforms in the cloud today. It's very possible. A lot of the work that I do at Control Group is building HIPAA-compliant applications in the cloud. So those are healthcare applications that comply with a bunch of privacy and security regulations to protect personal health information. And so some of that is medical imaging. You can imagine you wouldn't want your personal health information out there. And I'll say it's very possible to build really secure solutions out there. So I mean, I think that everyone should at least consider it. I find fewer and fewer of our customers are limited and prevented from using the cloud.
Sandip?
Yeah. So in terms of risk, I would say that the resource that you want to provide as a service, the cloud computing unit, there's no guarantee that it would always perform as expected. With dedicated, you have a very defined performance. With cloud, the performance is not really defined, and because of that, especially if you are a consumer-based or if you are a service that's paid service, the expectation is they come to your site and everything should work and everything should be instantaneous, everything should be fast. And that becomes an issue, or that's the risk. You have to scale out horizontally and manage the load such that even one instance or two instances go rogue, you should still be able to manage the load, redirect the traffic to these other ones, and they respond instantaneously. So that's the risky part about cloud, and that's the way to handle, I guess.
Yeah.
But cloud gives you a pretty good solid infrastructure to handle it.
Okay.
I think it's a very important point. If you architect a cloud system like you would architect a non-cloud system, you're going to run into trouble. You have to treat it as something different. And if you do, you can account for all sorts of things, like data centers disappearing. But if you do it wrong, then you have a lot of risk.
Now, does that get you to some extent into the people part of this? Because a lot of the people that have been involved in these systems are used to data centers, they're used to buying servers, they're not so used to the cloud? Are there ways of helping them through that? You don't have to all answer that. Anybody have to answer that?
Yeah, I mean that's a problem that that comes up with any kind of new technology. When I feel like sometimes people feel threatened by that. You're taking my servers away. I can't. Someone was saying the other day I can't hug my server anymore, which I think is that was pretty clever. But I mean I think that you know the way we've been approaching that when we deal with maybe an IT department that has a traditional staff or an organization that might not that might be thinking about that. It's sort of, you know, the change can empower an individual to get so much more done. I mean, you guys have probably experienced that, and I'm sure anybody who's used cloud computing has experienced something like this, where there's this aha moment when you realize that, you know, if I'm racking and stacking servers in a data center, I can do so many an hour, but with a couple of keystrokes, I can write a program that can launch 100 computers to solve a task for me, and then destroy them when it's done. It's like suddenly that empowers me as a systems administrator or a developer in a much, you know, a much more interesting way than it could with traditional infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's
not just the cloud, it's really virtualization is what you're talking about.
I'd say virtualization is a component of cloud computing for sure. I think I mean that's one of the challenges is probably that the term is so broad and vague. You know, virtualization is a component that's critical to cloud computing, but also sort of like an elastic model where you can sort of pay for exactly what you use and scale up and down when you want. Utility computing where you're paying for exactly what you want and what you're getting. It's super hard to define for me because, you know, right now for me, I guess, but I think that, you know, all those components really factor into making cloud computing really compelling, you know, and a new thing.
I think at a higher level, even cloud is just used as a term for like abstraction. Like
Yeah.
you're abstracted from like these systems. That makes it a cloud system. You don't have to run them. You don't have to install software. You don't have to perform updates. So like Salesforce is totally different than Amazon EC2, but they both use the word cloud for what they do. I think the good thing on the people question is that cloud has now become like a hot buzzword, which breaks down a lot of like institutional barriers. Like 3 years ago, you know, people would say, you know, it's crazy. I'll never send my data to the cloud, whatever that is. But now, like everyone, like even if they don't know what it is, thinks we have to get more cloud in our company.
Whatever it is, man, I want it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing that more because now you're seeing the CEOs read it in the magazines they see or the websites they go to. It's in the New York Times. It's in the Wall Street Journal. And I think the more you see that, you get people much more comfortable with things. But that comfort is very important. So we've talked a little bit about a few things that you can do with applications. Why would somebody do things like encoding in the cloud? Because you can buy encoding software. A lot of people, you know, if you're a large media house, probably already have a lot of these things. Why would you do things like that in the cloud?
I mean, Zencoder probably could answer
Yeah,
that one.
he would be the best person. I mean,
Go ahead.
we do encoding.
Go ahead, pick it up.
Do we have any Zencoder customers here who want to answer that? So I would say honestly, burstability is sort of one of the most fundamental reasons. Like as we talked about, it's the kind of workload where you actually just like waste a lot of money if you buy hardware because you have a bunch of unused compute, whereas you don't have to pay for cloud-based resources when you're not using them. So in terms of like fundamental economic factors, I would say that's probably the biggest one. The other thing with video encoding, and a lot of technology is like this, the state-of-the-art changes. It's a really complex domain, and the state-of-the-art changes all the time. So if you buy something in 2010, it may not be relevant in 2013 or 2011 and a half even. So a lot of groups who are used to doing it on their own get really tired of that because you're always having to buy new servers, you're always having to install new install new software or just live with limitations. There are video encoding. There's video encoding software out there that doesn't deal with basically iPhone video, the Apple HLS video standard, which is now like even bigger than web video. Like mobile video in a lot of places has passed web video, but that technology is only a couple years old, and so it's things like that kind of shift people to reevaluate what they're doing, and oftentimes they end up moving to the cloud.
Yeah, so let's talk for a minute about that. So now there are more formats. There's Apple formats, and there's all kinds of mobile formats and things like that. How do you see all of that impacting the cloud?
So certainly change drives people to look for new technologies, which is good for the cloud today. It also means that people are the amount of transcoding people do to publish one video is trending upwards.
Yeah.
So in the past, people might have done one encode to a single format to play back into Flash player, and now they might do 6 or 7 different sizes to 3 different formats, plus a different version to archive and a different version to send over here. So it increases the amount. Effectively, if you're not doing it in the cloud, it increases the size of the stack of hardware you have to buy.
Yeah.
If you're doing it in the cloud, it just it is a utility.
Yeah, and that's a huge. I mean, you're talking about the number of formats and the number of videos. I mean, you just mentioned about 20 videos is what you said. So imagine if you had a whole library of video assets that you needed to distribute. So you have 100 videos. You need to make 20 of, each video in a transcode. So that's 2,000 transcode jobs. If I have the 2 or 3 transcode servers in my office, they're going to get them done in a period of time. But with the cloud, you're able to sort of flexibly deal with that. So let's say, it's going to take let's say it might take 100 hours to solve that problem. Let's just say 100 hours for one computer to solve that problem. And let's say if that computer is $1 an hour, you'd be paying $100 to solve that problem. It would take you, like 4 days, but you could also, rent 100 computers for 1 hour, solve that problem in 1 hour. And what kind of value is that to the business? And I think that's really like when you start to be able to do things like that for someone that has to turn around a lot of assets in a lot of different formats, it becomes really compelling.
Sandip, since you have an application like this, do you see that as a benefit?
Yes, definitely. So we deal with the headaches that John just mentioned, different formats, different gadgets or form factors, all these using all the coaches who are our clients and players using these gadgets and complaining they are not able to see the video because then we have to investigate. It's a back and forth. So we are trying to, for cost reasons, we are trying to somehow still manage it ourselves, and we have been able to do it okay. But in terms of cloud, that gives us flexibility, saying that, now that iPhone, let's say for example, iPhone 5 or iPhone in general, HLS, suddenly it's WebM, the new video format that every browser starts supporting, and we have to now transcode all these 10,000 videos that we had for last 2 years because they are an asset for which all these coaches are paying. The case that David just mentioned is perfect. We would just launch all these cloud instances and they would just quickly transcode all these files to this new format, and boom, we are ready.
Keep going.
Sorry, if we were with the old way of doing things where we had dedicated hardware, that would have been, I don't know how many days or months. And in terms of business, in terms of client expectation, that can literally kill us.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Two more real quick anecdotes.
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple years ago, I was talking to the video ops people at a very large social company. You can pick who that might be. And they didn't do mobile video because they couldn't, because they had thousands and thousands of transcoding servers that dealt with their daily workflow. So if they were to go back over just 12 months and try to add another format, they'd have to have 365 times the number of resources that they have for their baseline usage to encode their last year of content to a new format. So they were like fundamentally limited in what they could do by that problem, which you don't have in the cloud. So another customer had this problem and came to Zencoder for cloud transcoding. They had 1 million files in their back catalog, and we transcoded them to a new format on a Friday. So.
That's pretty fast. The other thing that's going on is that there's now a lot of HD video out there. There's now some amount of 3D video. There's now also this Ultra HD video that's been coming out relatively recently. How do you see all this impacting the cloud, and when do you think a lot of these things will impact the cloud?
I guess they're already impacting because it's another format to be supported, like HD for sure, Ultra HD for television and broadcast networks, I guess. but it also means in terms of different profiles or flavors, video or original raw asset has to be transcoded into this, an addition to it. And now because that's an addition, it depends how your service is. It can be like you might charge for this service where some might just pay for this HD content or Ultra HD content. And if you do that, then you have a load which is very variable, because some might purchase that service, some might not. Again, because there is all this variation, cloud is perfect, because you can just say, okay, I need more resources to compute to get this HD video format done. I just add more servers and they just take care of it.
So you think even in the storage area or the bandwidth area, all of those things can be dealt with these higher end formats?
Yes, and kind of no. I'm not sure about the Ultra HD because that's not what I've dealt with. So I guess you guys can answer that.
Yeah.
But for HD, yes, sure, cloud can handle that, and cloud. In fact, the CDN that works with cloud storage perfectly handles it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, to talk about real, like this new format, this Ultra HD. When we were doing we used to do all these SD to HD upgrades for studios, and what that really involves, it's sort of hard to imagine, but really it's like a TV show or a studio will shut down for a period of time, and literally every single piece of equipment that touches the video would have to get replaced because you were dealing with this huge increase in frame size, more bandwidth that you're dealing with. That means more storage, more transcoding capability. Every component had to get changed. It was sort of unbelievable. And now here we go again. We're going to do it again, right? I think having a tool like cloud computing is pretty remarkable for this because, like you were mentioning before, John, the hardware is changing. We're going to have to replace everything anyway. But when I'm paying it for it by the hour, or I can swap in a different service, or I can, use Zencoder to transcode my stuff instead of, building a rack full of servers that's going to be able to handle that. I think having that tool in your arsenal really helps.
You have anything to add to that?
Can you guys do Ultra HD yet?
We can. We don't see much of it.
Oh, okay.
But we can, and we need to adjust our pricing model.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, you might want to consider that.
Yeah.
Because I know there's been at least some, at the last consumer electronics shows, you're beginning to see the Ultra HD TVs.
Yeah.
And a few people talking about content. So you're beginning to see, I think, the very beginning of this area, so it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
So now that we've kind of said, okay, maybe this is a good place to look at video and imaging and things like that. If you were somebody looking at this for the first time, what would you look at for sort of a provider? What kind of things should the provider be able to do? Because there's a lot of people out there now that say they can do, storage and bandwidth and coding and all this kinds of stuff. If you were somebody new to the area, what would you look for in these providers?
I think that question could be asked at a couple levels. One is if you want the raw materials to build a system, and the other is if you want to find a system that's already built.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I would say on the same kind of note. I mean, we're sort of steering our customers towards, and when available, using higher order services like a transcoding as a service. You know what I mean? Instead of us developing something and building a system, we can use something that's sort of off the shelf and available as a service, a cloud-based service for doing this. And suddenly we can spend our time and money building value in a different way. I think that's really something to think about because, like you were saying before, there's cloud computing companies that are infrastructure as a service. There's cloud computing companies that are platform as a service. There's and anywhere in between, there's all kinds of different things that you could get. I think it's a difficult landscape to navigate. But focusing on, maybe the thing to start with certainly is to focus on exactly what you're doing. And if you're in the IT department, that means working with the user that's requesting it or the businesses that are requesting it. An interesting thing that's been happening to us is as the services are showing up and making themselves look really easy to use, and then being really easy to use, hopefully, we're getting contacted a lot more, less by IT departments and more by people in the actual businesses that are like maybe someone in the marketing department that's saying, oh, hey, I need to do something with all these videos, where it's a task that usually like an IT department would handle, or the IT department would come to us and ask us for that kind of information. We're getting it straight from the business users. So starting with that business case is really, really critical.
Okay. Anything you guys have to add before I open it up for questions?
Well, I can add something in terms of if I'm the one who's looking for some provider who would provide me or my company video or image solution, basically, where I can just use their infrastructure and have that service into my application or integrated with my application, I would expect in terms of video unlimited. Video has transcoding. Video has, it takes a lot of bandwidth. It takes a lot of storage. So unlimited transcoding power, unlimited storage, unlimited bandwidth.
For a low price.
And for a low price. And if given an opportunity, if I know how they do it themselves, if they say that they have their own data center or they are not really using cloud technology, then I do have doubts. I know that if we have burst loads on our side, we are going to stuck up, or our customers are going to stuck up with their jobs are just waiting in the queue. But if they are on cloud, then I know, okay, they have some scalable architecture and I can rely on that. And those desirable things that I said, unlimited computing power, etc., they are kind of promised by cloud infrastructure, so I would go with that.
I'd say as a rough principle, it's not bad to choose the kind of highest level of abstraction that fits for what you're doing. So, we could all stand up our own farms of virtualized servers and build our own cloud environments, but that probably doesn't make sense unless you're trying to build that as your product. So, there's getting a product to an end user, there might be 5 or 10 layers kind of stacked on top of each other of technology. And it usually makes sense to go as high as you can, given feature constraints and customizability you need, and cost constraints as well. Having done it for the last few years, I wouldn't advise anyone to build their own transcoding farm. And in fact, lots of people who have done that in the past are saying doesn't make sense and kind of moving to your provider. And I think it's happening in lots of technology verticals. Email is now a service. Telephony is now a service, et cetera.
Okay, so I think we've done a little bit now on background here. So the question is, do you have any questions for the panel? Yeah.
So question to the panel. Where do you see the 5,000-pound gorilla known as Amazon fitting into this? You have people like Netflix using it. You have Newsweek that just went from a whole printed edition to now everything being online, tablet, phone, what have you, and it's all being hosted at Amazon. So can you maybe speak to that?
So the question, I guess, is where does Amazon fit in this? Is that the question? Okay.
Yeah. I could take a stab at that. I mean, we work a lot with Amazon. I think that where Amazon sees themselves and where I see them right now is they want to be, Amazon Web Services wants to be providing these building blocks for people to build their applications on, and that could include sort of anything. And they offer the base level services from storage, compute, and networking, and then a couple of other higher order services, queuing services, database services on top of that. I think that it's a little scary that they are it's hard to find competition with them. You know what I mean? Another cloud computing provider that has the same size and scale and capability. They're great. I think it's a great value. It's very innovative. It's really interesting. But a lot of people do ask us questions. What happens if Amazon goes down? Do I feel comfortable sort of building my product on a set of services in a company that's just one company? I think that we still recommend it. I think it's a great idea. It's sort of the best value. I really hope.
They're larger than their 5 biggest competitors, including IBM, HP. I was at a conference up here at the Hilton back in June, and virtualization, as you know, is an instant they're seeing 25% growth a year as a minimum. And in June, they were averaging 3.5 instances per month.
Yeah.
3.5 billion instances.
Yeah. I wouldn't be
I mean,
surprised.
that's huge.
I don't. They've really disrupted the whole market, and it's unbelievable to think that people like IBM. I mean, IBM has a cloud offering, and there's other people with clouds, But the way that they've sort of disrupted the industry is unbelievable. I really, I still think it's a great idea. It's a great platform. We do a lot of work with Amazon. We're an advanced consulting partner. I spent almost all day on their API. I think that I really wish that there was other options out there to protect against that. But for right now, I mean, if I'm going to be delivering real value to my clients, and if I'm in a business, I want to deliver value to the business, I should be innovating on things that that really make a difference. And providing base infrastructure, sort of, unless I'm selling that as a cloud-based service, it really doesn't. So I think it makes sense to use the best of breed, which right now is probably Amazon.
Do you see any way to use Amazon with somebody else? So as a backup or something like that, do you see any way to do that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the interesting things that's happening is Amazon is really an API to all their services, and their competitors. I mean, there's OpenStack, and Rackspace has something like is a member of that and offers a cloud in that way. And then there's Microsoft has a cloud. You can build software that interfaces with that can migrate workloads. There's a lot of new companies that are coming out that are sort of acting as provide systems that do cloud orchestration to allow you to move workflows from place to place, from cloud to cloud, from in your own data center on your private cloud to a public cloud. I think those are really interesting, and they make a lot of sense, and that might be a great tool to help with that.
We do almost everything we do in the cloud is on Amazon, and it's really, really good. And I wish there were more, because the world needs competition, and Amazon is almost a monopoly now. But fortunately, they're pretty good
What's
too.
interesting is you have baseline colos data centers now catching the idea. Telex, for example, recently has partnered with Amazon to take the people that have their core systems within Telex to be able to do backup and all types of things with Amazon, which is fantastic. I think that's where the industry is going to be going.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just see if there's another question up here.
Yes, in my company we're streaming games, and we are using CDN to distribute the games all over the world, basically. And I understand from here that one of the things here that you need to distribute your videos instantly, meaning immediately to everyone. And how do you deal with the issues with the CDN when you need to distribute it all over the world, like the next hour, and make sure that everyone, even in the other side of the world, will have the same quality of service that you want to give your customers?
So the question is around distribution. So how do you distribute quickly?
Okay. I mean, do you want to give it
I can.
I mean, you guys do a lot of distribution. I don't know if you're worldwide or.
We do, but our load is very different. So CDN makes a lot of sense for if you have one asset that gets hit by like million people. If it's like 10 or 12 people, which happens in our case, it's just one game and that team and those players, CDN doesn't add much value for us. So to be very frank, in our case, we don't really use CDN. We tried it, but it was working in a negative way for us, because before that asset goes to the CDN, it has to go from the source.
Yeah.
But Amazon does provide you a solution where you can push onto your edge network. So you have that option. Like if you know this is my game, in our case, this is a game video that will be hit very soon. Once it's transcoded, you can just push it on the edge, and at least for next 24 hours, it will get hits. But it's just 10 to 12 for us, so the economics don't work.
And I think that another thing to consider is your selection of CDN and how you're utilizing the feature set. And I mean, there's Amazon CDN. I mean, is pretty. It's good, but it's basic. You know what I mean? And they have a set number of edge locations. Other CDNs might have more edge locations that maybe in geographies where your customers are, Maybe you can do some parts of your application design or system design to increase the cacheability of objects, make sure they stay at the edge longer. There's technology like edge side includes, which would allow you to put some logic at the edge of the CDN, which can increase the cacheability of an object out there. Sometimes that stuff is applicable in a video space, but in other spaces it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of like tuning and tweaking to do with the CDN to really get optimal performance. But you might have to go for sort of a more expensive, more fully featured CDN to do that.
There's another question over here.
Yeah, my question's a little goofy but serious. I'm at home. My cable provider allows me to watch video on my mobile devices in my house. I also have a DVR, but I can't watch any of my recorded programs that are on my DVR on my mobile device. So my question really is, look at that as a problem, a consumer problem, and say, what's practicality that those cable delivery companies would virtualize your DVR? Does it make sense? Is it viable? Is it not viable? Does it work for them? Just some thoughts about that whole platform.
Yeah.
Are you talking about actually literally connecting your phone to your DVR?
No, I have a DVR in my house. Why do I need a piece of hardware? You guys have virtualized everything and you're preaching the cloud.
Some companies are doing that.
Well, I'm just curious, are you seeing it? Does it make economic sense? Does it make technical sense? I mean, I think I know why, but why can't I?
Yeah, the question probably is why can't
stuff on my mobile device?
Why do they-
You have the VOD. You have the video on demand, so why do you need the DVR?
Well, okay,
But if-
that's a good question, but
if-
as a consumer, I like to watch
Yeah,
one
you
show
want
all
to
the time.
watch specifically what you want to watch,
Yeah, but it's
and
all
that
kinds
could
of-
be put in the cloud. There's no reason why it can't be. So the question is, why would the cable companies not? That's the question.
Yeah.
What they allow to be done.
Yeah.
That might be the
that's really more the
answer.
question.
That the system you're describing might change the business model for people that distribute content. I don't know if there's a technical reason, but why not?
I think technically what you would like to see is hard to predict for that cable company. Like it would, let's imagine that this is a solution. The cable company would literally have all their content previously transcoded in all different various profiles and formats that you can, once it's televised, you can just watch it on your mobile or watch it anywhere you want. For that to happen, what I said is all that content has to be first transcoded and stored somewhere so that it's ready for you to access right at that moment. To do all of that content, it's a very hard problem also from economic standpoint, because you never know if how many people would really care to see that particular content. It can be just one small DVR that you recorded. If that can be quickly pushed onto the cloud by your choice, it can be, but I don't see that the video formats can happen instantaneously. There will be some time frame there will be some time lag. To avoid that time lag, you do everything beforehand, and there's a lot of, it's a lot of money, but it can be a good idea.
I mean, I think we'll certainly see some innovation in that space too. I mean, there's all kinds of rumors about Apple doing something to disrupt TV. So I know nothing about that though. So I really don't.
You have another question back there?
Yeah, so just a general question to the three of you. You look at cloud computing, what's the one feature or capability that you would like to see that's missing?
That's a good question. So
Yeah.
if you could add something to cloud computing, what would it be?
I think the biggest area that could improve is maybe the biggest area that could improve is bandwidth. The profile of if you use Amazon Web Services, you have really great bandwidth within that network. So you have fast transfer from S3 to EC2 and back and between EC2, it's a limitation of like America, right? It's like we have okay bandwidth, but could be better. And if I had a feature request for Amazon that they'll never do, it would be sub 1 hour billing granularity. So like we talk about like being able to scale up like that, but in reality we scale up like this with like 1 hour granularity on a server, which is incredibly powerful. Going from that to 2 year to 1 hour is like pretty big, but going from 1 hour to like a second could enable all sorts of other amazing things.
Yeah, I think something that I like to see too, and I sort of, it's a challenge. We're talking, John, you were mentioning cloud computing is another form of abstraction, and abstraction is amazing. But at the same time, sometimes I'd like to have sort of some more accountability and understanding about what's going on under the hood. Like I think that a good example was a couple of years ago now. There was a big Amazon outage that affected a bunch of places, including Heroku, which is a platform as a service that people were running their applications on. And I think that before then, I didn't really even think about how Heroku really worked, and how could if I could have known what was going on underneath the hood, could I have designed my application to work better, and make myself less vulnerable. I think Amazon does a good job, with that. They do provide a lot of information, but there is a ton of secret sauce about how everything works in there, how things are connected, what's really driving something. So it's sort of, I think that as people become to depend more and more on external services like this, having that accountability and that understanding about maybe not all the technical details about how it works, but at least enough understanding so that I can design to prevent a catastrophe is really becoming more important.
Yes.
Yes. So I've been sold on the idea of the cloud for a while.
We didn't sell you tonight?
No, I was just about to finish the sentence, and you guys went a long way.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, I always come back in the back of my mind to this question. Here I have all my great stuff, being a small business, all my baby, and it's a lot of secret sauces, this and there, and then I would put it into the cloud, onto the servers of who knows what. And in my darkest nightmare dreams, I see some internal guy, an employee, running a little script, follow all the companies on our servers who do this, and this, and compile it and analyze it and spit it out to me so I can get all the information I need. To what extent is this a completely crazy kind of paranoid scenario? And to what extent should we actually be worried, especially business people who are not on the inside of all the technical stuff, but making decisions as to what portion of our, proprietary stuff, IP, whatever, should we be moving to these servers, and what part of it should we not, or what types of things or should we not?
Google, you have the same problem with Google and Facebook, right? Like if you use Gmail, then theoretically, Larry Page can know everything that you've ever done. So,
but is this a legitimate worry? Because the law of big numbers says you're just a little guy, among millions of customers, and nobody cares about you. You're just, sort of protection in numbers in a way.
Right.
But is that really true too?
I mean, I think I would probably try to convince you that it's going to be okay, and we can get your applications or your business up there. I think that a lot of people are scared about that. I was mentioning before we work in healthcare, and that's a huge concern, for a number of reasons. But I think what you need to do is really evaluate who you're going to work with on the cloud and understand what their policies and procedures are around that. I think what sort of changed a lot of people's mind on the healthcare debate around this was when we looked at Health and Human Services talking about the number of breaches of personal health information that are happening and why they're happening, and based on the percentage of affected individuals. So the number of people that had their personal health information exposed. It was always because it was 84% of the time it was physical theft and loss. Someone stealing a hard drive or a computer. Someone leaves a laptop in a cab, something like that. I think that with a cloud provider that has the right policies and procedures in place, in a way that you can feel comfortable with them, and that would be like Google with Google Apps or Amazon with web services. Understand what they do about that, how they provide physical and logical separation between your data, how they anonymize your data, and then make a choice on that. And then also consider belt and suspenders approach. Consider encrypting your data. Think about key management. Think about maybe the cloud provider says that they're really going to, they don't have physical access to your data, they can't look at it, but you can always encrypt your data on top of it. I mean, depending on how paranoid you would like to be, there's a lot of options.
I don't like being Okay.
No.
Because
But
time and
it's-
money.
But paranoid is sometimes a good thing.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit more about encryption and things like that, because I have heard that is what some people are doing on top of things like Amazon, because then nobody can read it, even if somebody can get access to it. But that does add a level of complexity. So what's the plus and minuses of going that way?
I think some stuff there is no minus to encryption. Like, you just should encrypt. A plain text password in a database is never a good idea. Probably unencrypted health records on S3 is not a good
It's
idea.
a bad idea.
The reasons not to are, at some point you have to distribute something, so at some point it has to become clear.
Right.
So you can have DRM as like an attempt to make sure that the only place that it is ever clear is actually in like physical light and not in any sort of digital space. That's what a lot of people do with video. So their stuff, it has, yeah.
Right, so you encrypt it when it's sitting on the devices. So if it's sitting on storage or on a computer, it can be encrypted. But then when it goes out, it has to be open because it has to go out.
Yeah,
So-
although you can even plug some holes when it goes out, so that it's actually only a controlled player can decode it, and like you physically don't allow Windows to turn on like screen capture software like when you're playing back a video or whatever.
Yeah, that's a major feature for movie studios or people that content produce like television shows and stuff like that. When they're distributing content, they have demanded those controls and they're available.
Right.
Yeah. Also, if in terms of network access, you can always go over SSL, and this is not really related to DRM. But if you want to just make sure that whatever data was at the endpoint, that's what reaches to me and nobody else is able to see it, we just go over SSL, and most of at least Amazon provides end-to-end SSL for almost every service on the network. So.
Right, so there are ways of dealing with that if that's an issue that you have.
I would say that I would say that security in the cloud is actually no different than security anywhere else. You need
Yeah.
good physical security. You need good like network level security. You need human security and making sure that your employees are not stealing data, which is I don't know. I think a pretty common like security hole. You need the same thing whether you're using Amazon EC2 or Google Compute Engine or the colo down the block or your basement.
So any more questions? Yeah.
So my company's actually been looking at cloud storage for a while, and I've been pushing cloud for a very long time. I even tried to go to Google Docs and actually Gmail about a year ago, and it got shot down. Finally got some leeway. We actually are finally introducing some kind of hybrid cloud solution. Never been a big fan of putting everything in the cloud. I like still having a little bit local, and recently we actually signed on with a contract with a company to do some kind of hybrid solution with cloud. Now that's just for company storage. Now we're also a pretty large video production company as well. So we create a lot of video, a lot of content put onto the web. And recently we actually just signed on with Xbox. We have our own channel now. It's actually huge. They just released our own channel, application, whatever. We actually use Brightcove on our website as well. So my situation that I'm trying to figure out a solution for, which is I was hoping to get out of here, would be our video storage is our biggest problem now. We have a new video director. He doesn't know what he wants to do. He's been working off external hard drives for the last little bit now, and he's been going crazy. If he had any hair to lose, he would lose it. So we are actually looking at a few solutions on what to do, and I'm also leaning toward a hybrid solution as well. Our biggest problem is we don't have a colo. We don't have another location to store data in. So anything I would do needs to be some kind of replication. Dual Isilon systems, replicating data across, and I'm actually pushing a system right now to our video department and sales as well to actually replicate our data as well as storing our data, and essentially you don't need to back up your data if it's in the cloud, but at the same exact time you can take snapshots, push it to Glacier, and keep everything in S3 or RS. Have you guys come across anybody that are actually looking not just for encoding purposes, but actually for cloud storage and also cloud video storage / video editing off of some appliances that work in the cloud as well? Because that's one of the biggest problems. You have guys who have $1 million systems that don't just store their petabytes of storage, but also they need another system that actually backs that up, or some kind of crazy tape drive system or whatever. Do you guys come across anybody that are looking for a system to not just store the data, but also edit off that data that's on the storage?
So we're talking about storage and editing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
What's an example? Do you have
Yeah, I mean, we have, so before I got into cloud computing, I was a systems administrator for advertising agency, and one of the things I did was took over a storage network. They were using XSAN, and I got into XSAN and StorNext, which is a hierarchical storage management system for, it sort of migrates data between disks and tapes, and that's what I did a lot of for a long time, to support video editing. Now, and we were putting those in when we did those HD upgrades. Now when we're talking to people, they're really interested in reducing the footprint of that kind of thing and getting the kind of flexibility you have. So we have customers that have 80 or 100 terabytes of disk storage, coupled with hundreds of terabytes of tape storage, and a robot that moves it all, and it takes up a whole room in their office. And we're talking to them, there's this class of appliance that's called, which I'm sure that you've been looking at, a cloud storage gateway, I think is what people are sort of calling it. There's a number of vendors in that area, and what it is sort of an appliance that has disks in it, and just like an HSM, it can move data. It keeps active data on the fast disks where people can use it, and it moves the inactive data somewhere else. And in this case, with this gateways, they can move it to a cloud storage provider like Amazon or Microsoft or Rackspace. I think they're pretty incredible. And there's a couple that we should talk maybe after this. There's a couple that I think that can support video editing depending on the depending on the kind of video you're talking about, and the number of editors. But where it gets appealing is like, this company has hundreds of terabytes of video assets, but really only a couple terabytes of them are actually used at one time. So you really only want to keep those few terabytes in 2 rack units in your data center instead of having like 10 racks full of disks and tapes. It's pretty compelling.
Since we're looking at it right now, it's very similar to what you're saying, and we'll definitely talk after.
Yeah, sure.
All right, question back there?
Hi, thank you. I know that I'm sure that there are differences between the kinds of cloud storage that you have. One for storage, one for playback, now here, maybe one for editing. I work for small businesses, and most of these people probably think, oh, I'm too small to need that. At what point, but I have a feeling that it will only kind of penetrate more broadly if the mom and pop shops also start using the cloud storage and availing themselves. At what point, how many assets do you have to make a cloud worthwhile? And what are kind of some of the questions about this type of cloud that they're getting? What are some of those questions that if they have maybe only 100 videos, that they make sure that, they just don't have a big hard drive in the sky? How can someone protect themselves to make sure that they're getting what they need, but yet that it's not so expensive that they're priced out of the market?
So one of the huge advantages of cloud computing is that it scales up, but it also scales down. And so you can store one file for a couple cents. And so I think there's actually economies at which it's cheaper to use cloud resources than physical resources. And I think the kind of system you guys are talking about would be, I don't know how much that would be, but lots and lots of money. Yep. And you'd have to be very large scale to even justify that. So I think at small scale and at small scale, there's things that you just can't do. That actually the cloud makes a lot of sense for that it doesn't. Maybe you physically couldn't do it otherwise.
But is there maybe an easy way in? So if you've got somebody who's used to putting their assets on a little machine that's sitting in a closet somewhere, so that's kind of where they are, what's the first step in moving part of it, or what is it? Where do you see that?
Yeah, Dropbox. Yeah.
Dropbox.
Yeah.
That is sort of the for yeah. Like when I worked in the IT department, that was something that would really scare me. But you would have your users.
Can you explain for what it is?
Okay, so Dropbox, a consumer file transfer and storage service, I guess. You put files on your computer, and they get replicated to the cloud, and you can share them between computers. So if you work in an enterprise IT department, you've probably been hearing a lot about it in the last year because your users have already all installed it, and all of your data is already in the cloud, and you didn't know it.
Whether you want it or not.
So I mean, I think yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot.
Install. I'm like, no.
But you could embrace it
Yeah.
as part of your IT infrastructure because people are going to use it anyway. But
Yeah, and I mean for small businesses, and especially if it's just a couple of people with a couple hundred assets, maybe. I mean, solutions like that make a lot of sense. I mean, they might already be using it without even thinking about it. You know what I mean? There's a number of Charlie, what was that video distribution system that a lot of small places would use to distribute videos? Wired drive. Yeah, we not.
Wired drive.
Wired drive. Yeah, and that's like that's big. That's big for video, and it's a cloud-based solution that people are using to distribute video and integrate it into the edit and approval workflow. I mean, I think that probably you might. I mean, in a crazy way, I think that the smaller businesses and the smaller places might already be picking these up because consumer technology now is really cloud-based, and people just don't realize it. And when you're a small business or you're just getting off the ground and you're using the same consumer tools that you've always used, you're probably taking advantage of cloud computing.
Right, so you might want to think about some of these small ones and how to integrate them in, and that'll make the move easier. Yeah.
No, just a follow-up. Can one assume that, I mean, we're here talking about video, but, you know, not every storage device is also a streaming server.
Right.
You know, what would be a buzzword to know to differentiate those two models? I mean, you know, an archive, storage, you know, legal protection thing versus something that's going to be playing one time or 100 times an hour.
Yeah.
External.
For high volume delivery, you don't just want to put a video on a server. You want to have a CDN do delivery. The CDN replicates the content close to users, so it's not actually being pulled from your little server over here. It's being pulled close by. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know. You could use the same thing for a lot of these systems.
Well, my point is that people don't know, you know, it just seems like, oh, cloud, you know, what is that? You know, how do I navigate, how do I make sure that I get what I need? It's like, you know, here I have, let's say I have a small business, I have 100 assets, and I want them to be available on my website all the time. I can't store them, they're too heavy, prohibitively expensive for me to go buy the servers. You know, how do I make sure that if I sign up for some contract for some cloud person, that I'm going to get the right solution?
Right. I mean, maybe the. Oh, okay. Well,
use that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look at that.
Or one of 30 other companies that kind of offers. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, especially things that are customer facing like that or website facing are very good for the cloud because the cloud allows that kind of openness. So if you put your assets in almost any of the cloud providers, it'll be accessible to websites. That's fairly common for almost just about everybody.
Yeah, and I would look for words like check the pricing model. Make sure that you're not actually just giving them money to buy a server and put it in a closet for you.
Exactly.
Make sure it's it's like a scalable pricing model. Make sure they're talking about elasticity. Make sure they're talking about their network and where their edge locations are and where they have a presence. I think those are critical, and I think anybody that is real serious about providing solutions like that will be open and talk about that.
All right, we probably have time for one more question.
Just a very quick one. In the beginning, you guys mentioned that Amazon rules, and even for a lot of your activity, you use it. Can you clarify for us where actually using Amazon ends and your work on top of that begins if let's say, our business went in that direction?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'll answer for us, and I'm sure we're actually a little different. We mostly use Amazon's like building block services, so we get a bunch of like virtualized computers and a bunch of gigabytes of storage and a bunch of data transfer, and we use APIs to configure these things and get files in and out and to launch servers, and then we have an application layer that sits on top of that talks to those APIs, runs on the virtualized servers. So that's what we do, and we just basically use them for the exact same things we would do if we had stacked a bunch of servers in this room.
So they are the infrastructure, basically.
Yeah. They'll provide you everything from all the way up to the hypervisor, and then you're responsible for the operating system and everything on top of the instances. So they do the physical building and the networks and stuff like that, and then you're responsible for the things on top. So
if I want to start an entirely new web-based service, I have a choice of buying my racks and stuff, or I can go to the cloud. I decide not to buy my servers, I go to Amazon, but then when I want to refine everything much more, in a much more granular way, I go to you guys, right?
Yeah, well, and then there's, I mean, it's a huge spectrum too. I mean, there's providers that provide like a platform as a service, like Google App Engine or Heroku or Engine Yard, where it's just running your app, and then they abstract, so they go another level higher, where they're the ones that are responsible for the operating system and the application container. You're just responsible for the application. And then you could go, you could consume services that are an even higher order. So like the Encoder as a transcode service. You're just submitting files to them and asking them to transcode it, and they send them back to you. There's a huge spectrum in cloud computing of the kind of service that you're actually getting.
What's a good source on the web for us to understand this, like to see this whole ecosystem of? Okay, can you recommend something just to understand it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff out there. I'm actually really terrible. I pretty much just read the O'Reilly Radar blog, and that's it. But I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah,
I mean, you have a good.
But Wikipedia is a good.
That's a good question maybe for Eric going forward.
Microsoft, they plan-
Not a bad thing for the
platform,
technology
give them
council to do. Yeah.
And
some
full
tutorial
videos of
things about what
everything.
they
Yeah,
One more short. If you have something
Do you
that
have time for one? Okay,
Just short.
thought we could touch on compression real quickly. So video compression technology, does this affect you guys, and does it affect what you're doing, or are you agnostic to it? Is it built in? So just and where is it going?
What aspect of video compression
Well,
technology?
I guess video compression is needed for when you're going to store and when you're going to deliver, right? So you're trying to economize the data transfer, right? Does it affect you guys?
It's our business. It's what we do.
The
We,
compression side.
Yep. Compression and encoding are kind of synonymous. So basically, video is like.
H.265 for encoding and M- for delivery.
If in 2014 that may be the answer. Yeah.
So that's your core business.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. All video in the world, audio is not this way. Images are kind of this way, but all video in the world that you ever will touch is compressed, because uncompressed video is just so big. Like a CD would hold like, I should know the number, but like 3 seconds of video, or a DVD would hold like a minute if it wasn't compressed. Audio, like an audio CD is not compressed. It's an uncompressed format. MP3 is compressed, but like video is just too big. So,
Sandip, do you engineer your video? Like, do you control that to control your cost? Does that factor in for you?
Yeah. Compression is very big part of what we do for video services. Based on compression, there are different factors, like which format it is, what bitrate, what display size you're targeting for, all those things. But all in all, every video, as John mentioned, every video is compressed, and sometimes the users of our app, our coaches, they do upload some formats that are really uncompressed. So in terms of what we get in on the server, it's literally 10 GB. One game file, 10 GB, 2 hours of game. We transcode it, it gets transcoded to 1 GB. It's 10 times. That saves the storage. That also saves in terms of when we are streaming it, you need less bandwidth. Because waiting for 1 second before the video starts playing and 10 seconds is huge difference. So compression is essential, especially when we talk about not just storage, but also network transmission. So
All right, so do you have a short question?
Yes.
All right, one short question.
It's just kind of around the job market in these areas with your companies. I would expect that you're seeing growing demand in the area for skilled people in this area. Do you see now that there's a capacity to fill the needs that are going to be there? And are you doing anything in that area? How do you meet those needs?
hiring is really, really hard right now. We're in a tech boom right now, and so like, yeah, it's hard. I think another way to look at like cloud like at a really high level is that it lets you do things in software that previously you had to do in like the physical world. So what it does is like increase demand for like Like you theoretically need fewer people to like rack servers and more people to write software that that integrates with cloud services like Amazon. So it increases demand theoretically for software developers. But on the plus side, it's just software. So like any software developer can be a cloud, can work with this stuff. It's not a specialized skill set. It's a domain of knowledge, but.
That you need.
All right, I think you're getting a little too detailed. So you can talk to these
We
guys
can talk
afterwards.
afterwards, yeah.
Do you guys have any final comments, or we cover anything you want to add?
Go for cloud.
So we're all voting for cloud. Okay, I just want to thank the panelists, so maybe we can give them a round of applause. Okay, so thank you.
Thanks.